Welcome to the Behavioral View. Hey everyone, would you like to get a CEU for this episode? Listen closely for the announcement of 3 secret words delivered throughout the episode. Take note of those words, and we'll tell you where to go to get your CEU when the show is over. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Behavioral View, where today we are really excited to have Charna Mintz joining us with our regular panel. I'll let our regular panel go ahead and introduce themselves first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nissa Van Etten, and I am the Manager of Assessment and Clinical Training here at CentralReach.
And I'm Carrie Millico. I am the Director of Clinical Programming at CentralReach.
And I'm Shannon Hill. I'm Editor-in-Chief at CentralReach. And Dr. Mintz, I do not believe you work at CentralReach. Would you like to introduce yourself?
No, but I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun. I'm Charna Mintz, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for Action Behavior Centers.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. When we invited you, we had a pre-planning session for the year, just thinking through the topics that we wanted to talk about. And one of them was pretty vague. It was just, what do you think is the future, sort of the immediate future, the next 10 to 20 years of behavior analysis? And we thought that you would be a great guest for that. And then as you and I were talking in the pre-interview session of this, we really seem to focus mostly on the future of assent-based practices in behavior analysis. So I think that's our topic for today. We'll start out with that and see if we wander around any.
See where the behavioral spirit leads us.
You go where you go. So I want to thank you for all the great ideas in advance that you're going to join us and share, and hopefully stimulate some good thoughts out of us as well. But before we go there, we got to start with our question of the day. Ready, guys? Yep. So the question of the day is, what would you be doing if you were not a behavior analyst?
It's a good one.
It is. I wrote it, so thanks.
All right,
go for it. Sorry.
I feel like for me, I waver between doing something really structured with lots of rules. Love rules. So I see myself maybe doing something like accounting. I'm also fascinated by factories and fulfillment centers and improving or increasing efficiency and building culture in those environments. But that feels kind of obvious. And so I think the other side of me would say something in fashion. Maybe a buyer, love clothing, jewelry. So maybe something very, very creative and not necessarily aligned with my analytical self.
Oh, fun. Yeah. When I was in college, it wasn't until like my senior year that I changed my mind, but I was planning on going to law school to be an FBI agent. I totally wanted to work like organized crime. And I mean, granted, that was like more when I was growing up. FBI agents are needed for different things more these days, but I was totally loving that. But now in retrospect, the life of a dermatologist looks real good. I totally the importance of skincare. Like I spend a lot of money on like lotions and creams and like whatever. I don't care about makeup so much, but I want my skin to look good. And my sister-in-law works for a dermatologist, and like I can deal with acne and rashes and this and a little surgical. We're just gonna cut this out here. Like I can do that. I can live that life. That they like her practice. They take 1 week off a month. Like, give me that. You have the same amount of school as I do. That sounds beautiful to me. So I think that in retrospect, I think dermatologist, but my plan was FBI agent.
I have always loved working with kids since I was a kid myself. And I think when I was young, it was a preschool teacher However, after being a behavior analyst and having worked in a number of schools and shadowed and having my own children, I think it's exhausting. Shout out to all of the preschool teachers out there who manage groups of children and, singing and getting them
and
involved.
barely get paid. Yeah.
Yes. So my other interest is forensic psychology, criminal investigation, but I'm a scaredy cat, so I don't think I would do well in that role either.
We could have been colleagues.
You just want the badge. You got to show my badge.
Yeah, it's so funny because in high school, all of my best friends, there was a group of us, they were all wanting to go into psychology. I was like, that doesn't interest me at all. I had all kinds of other ideas. That was part of the problem. I had too many ideas in college for what I wanted to do. So my usual answer to this, and I think, Carrie, I've told it to you in the past, travel writer. That seems like the thing to do.
Awesome. Yeah.
I also don't know that today, with everybody being able to write on the internet, that you can really make a living at that, or I maybe not self-promoting enough to make a living at that.
Frommers. I used to buy a Frommers for every ABAI when I was in grad school and I was going to a new place. And someone's got to write those. And they're fun and they're witty and they have good spots. And
I was into the Frommers and the travel magazines and things like that. But if everyone is going to give the two-sided thing, the more realistic part of me, the other thing I was interested in a lot in school, besides behavior and analytic type frameworks, was sleep. Sleep is like it's the frontier that has yet to be explored, right? So I would love to dig more into that.
I could be your guinea pig if you just want to dabble around with that. I am historically a terrible sleeper.
Yeah.
I'll
thank you
too. I need some help.
Yeah. Volunteer tribute, right?
Yeah. There we go. I've got my crew here.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So we can just go ahead and shift gears and talk about another kind of dreaming. Let's talk about Assent-based practices, where we are, where we've been, where we're going. So I'm just kind of curious for you guys, if you would be open to kicking this off with thinking about some things that we used to do that seemed okay, that no longer are, just so we can see where we have grown from. You guys game for that?
Yeah. Confessional time, huh?
Confessional time, vulnerability.
It's a scary place to go to look back on what we've done and to be open-minded and talk about it. I love it.
Yeah. Block the exit door for the session room, wrap my legs around a learner's chair so they couldn't pop out of it.
Hold a demand for, and when I was doing some of this work, it was parent funded. So the parents asked for consultation and support. And if it was a parent's goal and the parent really wanted this goal to be implemented, we would hold as long as the parent was willing to have us in the home sitting there working on that target.
Yeah.
I think my confession might be a little bit worse, potentially. I also have been talking a lot about these things with my team because I want to create a space where it's okay to say some of the things that we've done in the name of science, supported by our research, taught to us by experts. But I think in general, I just used my hands and my body way more than was ever necessary to teach new things. And by that, I mean physical prompting, where the patient may have been resisting my touch or my interaction. There was a lot of tell, show, do, and the doing meant me assisting with the completion of a task. But I've also worked with adults and with individuals with significantly challenging or harmful behavior like aggression and self-injurious behavior. And I've moved children to timeout rooms with my body. I've closed doors. I've held those doors closed. I've used physical restraint, where probably the interventions that I was implementing resulted in escalated behavior, which then resulted in the use of physical restraint.
And, Charna, we talked earlier, we come from the same pedigree in many ways. I did too. And I think all of the things that you listed are things that I've done in the past. But I think also I owe some apologies looking back to people who didn't have the degree, who were looking at it from the outside saying, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that looks gross.
Yeah, and me saying, oh, this is the teaching procedure and this is the behavior plan, and you really need to follow it. Yeah.
So when I was in undergrad, my exposure to behavior analysis was working with undergrad students and teaching, like typically like just doing ABA, but with their study habits. And so I remember when I got into grad school and doing like the broken record and the 3-step and then the basket hold. Mm-hmm. I remember exactly that feeling of gross and going, oh, no, but that can't be right. I'm so green because like these experts and there's so much data and science behind this and stuff like that. Like it was, it's funny how our own intuition and people outside looking in were like, nope, this is the right way and this is the best way. And that's generally what we thought at the time. I even worked at this school, just these kids who got in trouble because they talked too much in class, and we were like the in-school suspension unit, and we couldn't do 3-step with them because they're middle school students, but we were the broken record. And I remember 45 minutes, we would tag in and tag out of being like, put your name on the paper, put your name on the paper, put your name on the paper. And these guys, what are you doing? Like, and these kids who are 11 who are reading Harry Potter books, and they're like, what? And we had no other resource. We couldn't just be like, hey man, what's going on in class? Let's talk about your values. Let's bring in some of this like none of that stuff was a resource of ours. And it was broken record. And
one of the things that I've thought about before with this too, is that not only did we think that we were doing it right for the right reasons, and we had the research base, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to admit that there was some social reinforcement going on, because if you were working one-on-one with someone who was just easy to manage, you're working one-on-one with someone who's easy to manage. If you have someone who's difficult to manage, or you're doing something like what you were just describing, Carrie, you're interacting with your colleagues and you're forming these bonds around this. And honestly, you get some really interesting stories that come out of doing that as well. And those things live. I think there's some social reinforcement for implementing those kinds of procedures that maybe you don't get when you're doing things that are less challenging. So,
and I would say like reinforcement also in the terms of like that power play, because after you went through that extinction burst, it was like,
right?
As opposed to like, you walked off feeling proud, as opposed to being like, holy crap, like all this turmoil that we went through that then I have to clean up, like not looking at it as like, hey kid, like that was rough. That was hard. Like, how can I be here for you? It was like, boom. Yeah. I got the data point. Right. And it's like, it's really gross to think about it. And how like it was something to be won.
Yes.
As opposed, right.
Yes.
That's a good way of describing it. For me, I've been thinking a lot about maybe not what, motivates the situation, but where my focus was and why those decisions, like why did I engage in those interventions or apply those interventions? And I think it's because most of my training and my experience post PhD was see the behavior, observe the behavior, say why the behavior is happening, treat the behavior. Yeah. And I don't think, and I was a teacher before I became a behavior analyst, I don't think I was shaped or taught or thought about the whole human being in front of me. right? I was so uber focused on just the behavior in front of me. And when you step back and you see the human being that you're engaging with, some of those interventions just no longer feel like they're appropriate, whether the research says they're effective at reducing that particular function or topography of response. I don't know. I think that's where I missed the boat.
Secret word number 1, escape.
So, how are we better now? What are we doing? What do you, as a field, not just us personally, but where are we at this moment with Assent-based practices?
I think we're moving in the direction of education and understanding. And like Charna mentioned, we're really, really looking at the individual as an entire individual that we're working with. You know, we've got, and I bring this up every time we have a podcast, but compassionate care, rapport building. We've got Assent. We're really trying to understand and teach new supervisees the terms between Assent, how we capture Assent, what that looks like, from the assessment process all the way throughout treatment. And yep.
Even with intake, like
Yep.
how does Assent show up with intake, right? Like across all touch points. And I think that like better doesn't mean good. Like given where we should be and where we are, I think that those are two different places. But yeah, I think there's forward momentum. But I think that we need to run and not walk to get there.
I feel like a lot of the times when we talk about Assent-based practices, we give some examples, right? But I do tend to hear the same kind of examples again and again. And I'm wondering if we're doing enough to educate people on the specifics of Assent-based practices. What does it look like? Not just when someone is obviously saying no, when someone is obviously withdrawing assent, but throughout the whole process of working with someone. What does that look like?
I have an answer, but I want to hear what Charna has to say about this.
I mean, I feel like we are, one step into a 1,000,000-mile journey, if I'm being honest. And I say that because I think we're just now creating some safe spaces for people to just start talking about some of our science-backed, evidence-based interventions that are prolific across our journals, and saying it's not just enough to have the science back the effectiveness. But one of my colleagues said it's not about effective, it's about appropriate. And so I don't want to take full credit for that. But I think we're just like one step in the right direction. And I'm confronted still all the time when I want to talk about the impact of, let's say, an extinction burst to a child. The first thing that's said to me is, what about the 1995 article that Lerman and Awada wrote around, the extinction burst just isn't as prevalent as we think it is. And my argument is, yeah, but those are in controlled research studies. And right, they're not data pulled from an environment like mine where there are 9 RBTs trained to work with a child across, 30 hours of care. And people call out and people leave, and you don't get those consistencies. I see those extinction bursts all the time, every day.
Right.
And not so much anymore because we're trying to not implement some of those procedures. But I think we've got a long way to go. And I think as a field, we're still trying to settle on, in some cases, is this still science? Is this still the right way to go? Is this the right way to go?
Oh yeah, people are definitely bringing that up.
Yeah, I don't think I met with a consistent response that some of our interventions did not put the person or the individual first. We put the behavior and the reduction of those behaviors first. And until collectively as a field, we're all willing to say that, or most of us are willing to say that, we got lots and lots of steps in front of us.
I couldn't agree more. When Nissa was saying that we're in like the stage of education and awareness, that is not nuance, right? And so, Shannon, when you're talking about the specifics of what we do, that's nuance. And we are still in the stage of people understanding what assent is, how to measure it, how to define it for your learner. It's not a topographical definition by any stretch of the imagination, right? And like my husband does the training of the RBTs at the Learning Consultants, and he's like, yeah, okay, I got a new batch, and I talked about Ascent, and they're like, you mean the thing that you smell? Ascent? You know? So it's just like, it is not, yeah, like we're still at welcome to the world of Ascent. We will start you on your journey, you know? I think, and which I think is frustrating for like, you know, my behavior analytic family are the precision teachers, and they've been doing this stuff before I started, because I remember one of my first presentations that I saw was Michael Fabrizio talking about Ascent, you know, is voting with your feet in the early 2000s. And because precision teaching is often like, you know, the sibling that we ignore in our field, it didn't get much momentum until recently. But God, those people have been doing gorgeous, beautiful work with nuanced interventions. And so when they see all these, you know, new people talking about Ascent and stuff like that, they're like, oh, okay, no, nothing new yet, you know, but that's because our field as a whole is not ready for the nuance, because right now, like Charna, as you mentioned, you're still getting pushback for saying it's pseudoscience or where's the data, right? So if we still are having those fundamental debates, then it's really hard for us to what like in a dissemination plan, right, at wide scale, to talk about all the nuance and complexities, or else we'll just be going over people's heads.
I have so many thoughts to everything you just said.
It doesn't surprise me.
One of which is, I don't know, part of it is sometimes I think we don't agree on what behavior analysis is, which if there's one thing that I say repeatedly, it seems to be that. And socially significant behavior change, how do you have socially significant behavior change if we don't look at social significance of our interventions? It bothers me when people make that argument that the procedures are not research based, when I don't feel like the philosophy is evidence based necessarily. If we're looking for socially significant behavior change and we ignore what society says, or we ignore what our recipients are saying, then what evidence base do we have anyway? That's one.
And you know what's so frustrating about that is that grad school, me, 1999, 2000, we were talking about the importance of evaluating the social significance of anything that we were attempting to reduce or to teach. And so to think back to all those years ago, and you don't see changes in our research or our publications or in the work that we do. I mean, I'm the first one to admit I'm not, or wasn't, evaluating the social significance of the things that I was aiming to help make better.
Right. And if you did, it was like a survey, right? Something very,
yeah.
It was one question intake. Certainly didn't take the child into consideration at all, just whatever it was that the family was asking for. And, you know, I think about a lot of those interventions, particularly maybe around feeding, where there wasn't a child that was in like caloric distress. There wasn't a child at risk of receiving a J-tube or a G-tube, but the family wanted the child to eat different foods. And so as a result, I would put into place interventions that clearly were traumatic to that child. I'm not sure that would meet what I would consider socially significant today, but back then the parent wanted it, therefore equals.
Therefore it was socially significant.
Yeah. But if you try hard enough, you can make a justification for what you're doing. And we've been doing it for many, many years, right? If the child doesn't learn to accept a wide array of food now, then they never will. And eventually it's going to hurt their nutritional balance, blah, blah, blah. Most children actually do gradually broaden that. I raised one of those. He still doesn't eat a wide array of foods, but he's also perfectly healthy and in better shape than I am. So I don't know. There's just this fundamental question of, also in my mind, in reaction to what you're saying, Carrie, is, are we there as humans yet? Not just behavior analysts, but do we respect other people's
No.
opinions and
No.
ability?
So, okay, yeah. So I haven't worked in the world of autism through my whole professional career, right? And when my husband and I owned a clinic working with children for academic advancement, uh, the the parents who love their children and were investing a lot of private funding to help their kids academically, like, dismiss the children in the same way or would not provide a cent. We as a culture, we gathered around a viral video of, was it Nana and her grandson making cookies, and that was the most handsy of a grandma that I've ever seen. Here's this 3-year-old who just wants to make, he's got sugar in front of him, and, depending on the cookie, I think it's brown sugar and white sugar. You got a stick of butter, right? And he's, he looks to be no older than 3. And talk about that fun sensory experience. So what does he do? He gets his hands all in everything and he squeezes the butter because it's melty. Do you actually think a 3-year-old is going to cleanly bake cookies with you? No. So let's manage our expectations. And then, because that grandma was knocking his hands away and doing this, and she's laughing while she's doing it. And it even got to the point where daytime shows were sharing it on social media and laughing about it. And I watched it and I was cringing because I was like, he's doing what a 3-year-old does. What more do you expect? He's having a great time and you are just blocking everything. And if you wanted it to be clean, you need to rearrange that environment for him in a much different way. So no, I think as a society, I think we all need to really realize how we treat others, how we treat disabled people, how we treat young people, how we and providing them with dignity and respect at all fronts.
That's something that Caspro and I have had a lot of talks about. So for our watchers, Caspro is our one of our content creators who does a lot of work within Ascent, and in my role as editor is always to read what people are pushing out and push back a little and trying to see it from everyone's perspective. And one of the things that Cass would say was, does this person would you do this with a typically developing child? And I was a little concerned about doing that because where I come from, I think that there's a lot of things that happen to typically developing children that would not fall into what we're wanting when we're talking about Assent-based practice in schools even. Yeah.
Secret word number 2, science.
When I think of Ascent, I also think we need to consider cultural practices, because I know, for example, in my own culture, as a child growing up and even as an adult, my parents don't listen to the podcast, so I can say this, Ascent is not a component of the way that we operate. This is what we say, this is how it goes, and you have to do it whether or not you agree or like what I'm saying. So I think, there's a large piece of, going back to what you said, Shannon, the nuances, and I know, Carrie, you'd mentioned the nuances of Ascent. How do we capture that from those individuals we're working with? Is there a checklist? Is there a way that we can observe it within the behavior and how they're reacting and acting towards us? And then even further, how are we doing that with respect to what they're demonstrating? Because they may have, especially if we're looking culturally, a way that they're operating within their family structure that they've been taught to operate, where there might not be Ascent, but this is how they fit within that culture. We need to also consider.
Nissa, I want to comment on that a little bit because one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about, particularly when my new BCBAs come to me and say, I don't get this Ascent thing, you just let them do whatever they want. And for me, at first I was like, yeah, please let them do whatever they want, because what you're doing right now is making it worse. And so can we take a step back? But I sort of see it as a starting place and an ending place. And so for a child that is living in a home where the expectation is that you don't get to disagree and you need to do everything that you're told, I would want to go on, and this may or may not be right, I'm just going to say out loud where my brain is at right now, I'd want to go on that journey of the starting place let me establish myself as a reinforcing agent. Let me teach you some self-advocacy skills to be able to say, like, stop, or I don't want it, or give me a break, in whatever format that response needs to be in. And then start to build in, what does following instructions and cooperation look like? How do we shape it and get it to a place that matches family expectation? And I think what I'm seeing, and I've got a lot of brand new BCBAs that work in our organization, is this jump to tolerance and the term compliance makes my hair stand up. So I'm going to say cooperation. We jump there, but we've not done any of the necessary shaping that's necessary to get there. So I think we can be highly sensitive to variations in family and cultural expectations, but I don't know that we can always start there. I think it needs to be our goal. At least that's how I'm starting to formulate the answer to the question of, what do I just let them do whatever they want? That's not going to work for my child or in my center.
Yeah, because you have to build in resilience. You know,
really do.
It's not like, as my kids would say, a yes day, for like in perpetuity, right? You start there, right? But then you have to build resilience. And on both sides, like resilience to be like, okay, under this condition, I see that like me taking apart your printer is not going to be allowed. Okay, I'm going to accept that. No. But then also resilience in the no, I did, like, as opposed to accepting no, I'm telling you no, because sometimes our learners or anyone is in a situation where they have to say no multiple times to keep them safe and those safe around them, right? And so and that's where the nuance comes in. But like, again, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, we used to teach this to direct care staff, and we would always start with something very, very simple, like, can they choose between the apple and the orange for their breakfast fruit? Just starting with the whole concept of offering choice at all, and then growing into, I think I'm pretty sure I'm going to say the right name. I remember sitting in a training session that was run by a guy named Dan. I'm not going to say it right. I'll look it up and put it in later. His name was Dan. I cannot remember what his last name was, but he talked about the frustration of staff in trying to get someone to comply with taking a shower who just seemed to not want to take the shower, and everyone was mad all the time because they were getting splashed and wet, and then they had to go do their work. And do you guys know how they fixed this problem? Put raincoats on the staff. And then suddenly everybody involved was having a good time, right? So it just began to introduce for the staff the idea of look at it from a different perspective. And it's okay to be selfish. I think sometimes people feel on the defensive because we feel like we're saying your feelings don't matter. But by asking the question, how could this session be more fun for you other than this person obeying everything you say? Right. Because a lot of times we're stressed at the same time that the learner is stressed, and we don't even realize that the same fix might work for both of us.
Yeah.
I love that example so much.
Yeah, I've got to go back and find out what his last name is. He deserves to be cited for that. Yeah.
But that brings in like that, are we ready as a society? Because I think even like parenting, how many times have you said no just because it was an inconvenience to you, or right? Or
I said
you
no,
wanted
to in a bad mood right now.
Like, it's just like, I mean, and I always have the caveat that like providing therapy and treatment is not parenting. Like those two things are not the same. But, I think that we sometimes look at that and say like, oh yeah, that's annoying. Let's have him. But like, so, like there's so many times where it's like, do we need to intervene? Like, do we really need to intervene on that? Right? Like, is that, or is it more that environmental support? Is it the raincoat? Right. I think that probably happens more often than not, because I think that looking at behavior that way is a new perspective.
So how do we assess when someone is ready to start working on things like tolerating no and different gradations of no? And his name is Dan Halsepian. It came to my mind just now.
Wow.
Good memory. Good memory.
I don't know that I have a definitive answer, although I think if Dr. Greg Hanley were here, he'd have some answers to that with some of the work that he's doing. We're trying to figure that out on an individual level with the children we're responsible for serving. But I would think it would be being happy, relaxed, and engaged for more of the learning session than they're not, and a demonstration of success in learning skills that are a little less aversive than learning tolerance or accepting no. So can you demonstrate teaching with skill development under less aversive contingencies? And if you can, then I see that as shaping sort of the yuckiness for the child, what they can tolerate over time.
Yeah.
Just don't think we pay attention to that at all. Really.
And agreed. I love all that nuance. And it's also not just like understanding that it's, when you think about shaping up that program, it's not just a flat no, because that can be coercive as itself, because you're like, okay, if this is a no, then that means you lose all of this stuff, as opposed to like, what about negotiation? What about bargaining? What about, okay, I can't have that granola, but what else is available that could maybe fill that spot, right? I think that there's a lot of, you're looking at who's the person that's telling you no. Do you have a built-in trusting relationship with them where you know that there's like, they're not the one who always tells you no because nothing, but it's like, okay, so this person, we have a good relationship. They, the no is, maybe the beginning just very intermittent under certain situations over things that are not highly preferred, or, like the no doesn't have a huge consequence to my life, but you're telling me no for Mickey Mouse, and Mickey Mouse is my favorite best friend, like that's something huge, as opposed to being like, oh, so you don't have the blueberry fig bar, but you have the raspberry. Right. So I think that there's like different ways in which you would play with the variable attributes of starting that program, even without to like what Charna said with regards to like the prerequisites.
Yeah. You know who else is actually doing some good work on this without saying that's what he's doing is Steve Ward. Inventory of Good Learner Work Repertoires definitely delves into all of those kinds of skills and is probably a good opening into what skills.
Yeah.
Steve Ward was a supervisor of mine, and I remember a lot of we didn't call it tolerating no, but it was gradients of no. So it was gradients of denial where, hey, right now this is not an option. It's going to be up high. I can't get it for you, but in a little bit when you come back, it likely is going to be an option. So let's find other options in this period of time that I can offer you. And then let's go back and have you request for that activity that was up high that maybe I couldn't reach. But it was a really fun way to learn, taking rapport building and pairing into, I'm going to deny access just for a little bit because maybe I can't reach it and I need to grab a stool and you've got to wait for me to go and do that.
He did a video for us, and and it was about teaching no at the first step, and it was taking the child around the house and pointing out things that he doesn't want to do and telling him no, he can't do it. And it was just so much fun. You could tell the kid loved it, so there are some creative ways to do that, and there are some people doing some really good work, I think, that deserve a shout out.
For sure.
Well, what is next for us as we develop along this gradation of Assent-based practices? Then, what do you think we are missing that we need to put out there? You'd like to see if you're not going to be the one to do it?
I mean, a million. At first, I want to say the first question you'd asked, I think, was where are we? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to downplay the excitement that I see and the gratitude that I see from younger or newer clinicians to the field who have maybe served as RBTs under non-Assent-based programming. They're so passionate about these ideas and these notions, and they will take something small and run with it in such a big way. And so that really excites me in terms of where I think we are headed. Is I think there's going to be a whole generation of BCBAs that will do the work and the research behind this to support some of the things that we're talking about. For me, I think there need to be tools in evaluating what assent and assent withdrawal look like for each individual that we serve. And we're doing some work individually in our own organization, but I would love to see something that is more collectively agreed upon. I'd love to see treatment plans require these components when we are turning them into payers, primarily private insurance payers, but also Medicaid and TRICARE. Like if they start asking for it, then we will start providing that. Yeah. And then lots and lots and lots of examples of the topography, presumed function, and this is how maybe you would have looked at it with, let's say, some small FCT program and escape extinction if the behavior is escape motivated. And these are 7 other ways that you could have solved that problem without going down that route, without creating an aversive contingency or risking creating an aversive contingency for that child or individual.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you just said. And I do think sometimes it's a lack of creativity and lack of or just exposure to other ways. So yeah, this idea of showing all of these different options that you could have done it, not just one other way. Because I think the idea that there is one correct way to do it is an obstacle to getting people to do it.
Yeah, because they've learned one way, right? Like even myself, like when Carrie was describing in grad school that she learned to repeat the direction as a form of not allowing the individual to escape the demand. I was a few years ahead of Carrie and learned the exact same intervention, putting my hands on a very large child that was, 1, going to clobber me, and 2, was clearly saying they didn't want it. So, yeah.
I also think that it needs to be embedded in our in academia, right? So when we're having an observation and measurements course, how does it show up there? If we're having an assessment course, how does it show up there? We have an intervention course, how does it show up there? Like making sure that it like lives and breathes, as well as like, you know, how do we respect the cultural sensitivity of our clients? Like all of those things, like it shouldn't just be a class. Okay, today students, we're having a class on assent. It is like, how does that weave through everything that we do so we can think about it more comprehensively?
Yeah, and I think with the curriculum changes that are coming, that's the way it's meant to be done too. So I'm excited to see what comes forward from that.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to get to the point where it's like the outsiders is that televisibility thing, right? And so where before, Shannon, you mentioned the outsiders going, ugh, you know, I want people to be like, oh yeah, no, this looks healthy, this looks fun, this looks like therapeutic as we know, like colloquially to be. I want it to be embraced by that. And then I think that that's why, like, I don't think that we need to be fighting this battle with people who criticize ABA. We need to like show up in different ways and do the work to show. If we say that this is, you know, positive and therapeutic and healthy for the individuals that we serve, we need to show that through our procedures and methods. Just like walk the walk.
Secret word number 3, raincoat.
Carrie, I could not agree more with that. I think the days of saying, well, that was bad ABA, or that's not ABA, or that person who identifies as autistic they don't have autism. Right. To me, I feel like I can point to enough things that I have implemented backed by science, evidence-based, that I would never implement today. And that if somebody saw it, would have a lot to say about it and probably induce some trauma. And so I think we all have to get to that place where it's our responsibility to show that our interventions are safe and they are kind and they put the child, you know, front and center in terms of every decision that we make.
Yeah, completely.
I love that. I think that actually serves great final statement, as a matter of fact, because this has just flown by. I think I could sit here for another hour,
I
but
know.
we did not ask Dr. Mintz to stay here for that long, so I don't think we do. We just want to do a little roundup and just say, does anybody have anything that they want the world to know about, anything coming up that we want to tell our listeners and viewers about, Ascent or otherwise?
This will air after this happens, but hopefully maybe it will land. I don't know if Weeba is doing. Charna, do you know is Weeba doing recordings of the presentations?
I don't know. I haven't signed anything yet, so I don't know. But
okay, yeah. Well, if they do, if not, then we'll look to like house it on the LMS. But I'm giving a talk called "Waiting to Grab the Torch" and talking about women in leadership and things like that. So I'm excited. This is like the first time that I've talked on this topic, but I have so much for it, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to get that talk.
The teasers that you've dropped have been very interesting, so I'm waiting for it.
I have so much fun data. Like, yeah. It's not just going to be a bitch fest. That's not what it is. This one guy. Oh. What a tool.
For me, I'm really looking to collaborate with anybody that has data sets related to sort of traditional intervention, and then what does it look like after you've learned about Ascent and put some protocols and procedures in place? Because I have this hunch, and I know we're not supposed to have hunches in science, but that a lot more learning and skill development can happen in an Assent-based approach than in some of our traditional approaches, where we basically create behavior that we then need to make those behaviors go away before we can ever get to learning. So if there's anyone in the universe that has sort of pre and post data, even if it's just one program or one response to one behavior, we're trying to capture some of that in our work here. And I'm sure there are others that are out there practicing doing similar things.
That's great.
Yeah. It's exciting. You have my mind going.
And you're willing for them to contact you?
Yes.
Okay. We'll put your email in the show notes then. Awesome.
Yeah, that would be great. And be kind and patient with me. That it sometimes takes a week or two for me to respond. But
you're the big boss lady.
Doesn't mean I get to avoid my email, but it does take me longer than it used to get through all of them. Yeah.
Nissa, you have anything you want to share?
I'm just over here trying to get recordings out to you, Shannon, and keep up.
Awesome. So we have released the entire series of the assessment cohort. So anyone who missed that can certainly come find it. And as for me, I'm actually tailoring some content for behavior technicians who are going to work in schools or who already do. So we're going to add that into the 40-hour path as an elective. And for anyone else who may want it, they can just have it. You don't have to be in an RBT course to do it. So that's what we have going on, and we'll be sure to drop all of this information in the various places where people are accessing the podcast so they can find things. Charna, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fun.
This was amazing. You bright, beautiful, wonderful human beings. I was so happy to join you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today on the Behavioral View.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Behavioral View. To get your CEU, follow the link in the instructions below. You can then go to the attendance verification quiz, where you'll enter in the secret words and pay the CEU fee to generate your certificate. If you've already done the work, you may as well get the credit.